Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Device Authority's Virtual Summit. We're here to explore the intersection of cutting edge technologies, security, and the ever evolving threat of uh, LASK. In this webinar we're going to discuss two very important topics: post quantum encryption and zero trust, which, as you know, is something that is top of mind today in terms of security, especially when you're dealing with connected devices. Today we are with Andrew, and Andrew is going to walk us through this journey of how PQ is impacting security and also seeing how we can be prepared, right, when that time comes. So Andrew brings nearly 2 decades of experience in the PKI world and also in the strong identity sectors. For the past 4 years, he has been a valuable member of the Entrust team. Currently, Andrew holds an important role in the Entrust Global Center of Excellence, where he represents the Entrust PKI portfolio. His responsibility stands to supporting both Entrust strategic and the enterprise accountings. So, Andrew, thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Julio. Thanks, everybody, for your time and attention today. My name's Andrew Sheedy. I'm with Entrust. And today I'm going to talk about the quantum threat. I'm going to talk about PQ crypto and the migration from classical crypto. And I'm going to finish up with how this kind of fits into a zero trust paradigm. So let's get started. So just kind of set the stage a little bit in the fact that there are devices that are known as quantum computers. And these are primarily in research and development phase. A lot of the big technology providers that we're familiar with are investing heavily in it. Nation states are investing heavily in it, including the United States, Canada as well. The promise of quantum computers is that they will be able to perform calculations and computations at orders of magnitude greater speeds and efficiency than what we're familiar with today in terms of what we call classical computers. So still very much a nascent research and development driven field. A lot of progress is being made. It's a little non-deterministic because there are breakthroughs that are made almost on a monthly basis. But this is something that the expectation is that scaled quantum computers, and when I say that, I mean quantum computers available for common use cases are expected to be available sometime within the next 6 to 10 years. It's a little undetermined at this point because a lot of the progress is being determined by research and development efforts. And as you know, there are frequently breakthroughs and setbacks in that type of arena. But the conventional wisdom states that by probably early 2030s, we'll have scaled quantum computers available. To that end, the National Institute for Standards and Technology in the US has, over the past almost 10 years now, been running an algorithm competition and I'll get a little bit into, what the issues with classical cryptography are now when held up against the lens of a quantum computer. But it's important to understand that there are right now 3 draft standards built on algorithms, crypto primitives that were developed as part of this competition. There are 3 pre-draft standards that are in the queue right now. We expect that they'll probably be approved sometime this summer. They're laid out there on the left-hand side of the screen there. FIPS 203, which is based on the Kyber algorithm. It's known as MLChem in NIST parlance. That's for the key establishment scheme and accompanying encryption. And then the digital signatures. For digital signatures, there's two draft standards, FIPS 204 and 205, based on the dilithium and Sphinx Plus standards, respectively. There's still a draft pending for the fourth winner, if you will, of the NIST competition, which is known as Falcon, colloquially right now. So the draft is still pending. But as I said, we expect FIPS 203, 204, and 205 to be elevated to formal standard publications sometime later this summer. So what's the quantum threat? The quantum threat is that quantum computers will be able to break current public key encryption. And the problem really is in a workaday type of TLS transaction. What happens, as you probably know, is that there is a exchange, and then a symmetric key is agreed upon, and then the traffic is then between the endpoints is exchanged, encrypted using that symmetric key. The problem and where traditional crypto such as RSA or ECC is vulnerable is in that key exchange mechanism. That's where post-quantum or quantum computers are going to be able to break current public key encryption. There are a couple other things that I'll get into a little bit later in the presentation, but essentially what that means is that there need to be steps taken now, even though that this is expected to be, what we're calling a 7 to 10 year problem. This is going to represent a significant migration in the different protocols that we're dependent on every day, even after the standards are finally approved. There's a lot of work that still has to be done. And most organizations don't really have a good sense of where they stand from a crypto inventory perspective. I think the notion of cybersecurity, vulnerability scanning with commercial scanners and InfoSec teams is fairly well understood at this point. But I don't know that this has really made the leap into understanding where your crypto artifacts are, where your crypto risks are from a similar operating model. So that's something that needs to change. So organizations really need to be taking that seriously. Long-term devices, and when I say devices, I mean, I'm specifically speaking of devices with signed firmware, with signed code payloads that operate the devices. Anything that depends on a digital signature needs to be protected now. If those devices are projected to be out in the field for a period of longer than 10 years, they're going to probably be vulnerable to attacks by this type of computing facility. And the failure to migrate is really going to kind of leave some of your devices, your endpoints, and some data at risk longer term. And I will get a little bit more into, kind of what that means from a detail perspective. But ultimately, by 2031, the expectation is that quantum computers will have advanced to the point where they're able to efficiently break, what we depend on in terms of our battle-tested public key crypto in terms of RSA and ECC. The transition kind of looks like this. And, I think it's important to understand that first and foremost, this does not affect in most people's perspectives what we depend on for symmetric encryption, which is AES. The primary issue is with asymmetric encryption, public key infrastructure. And as I mentioned earlier, the real issue is in the key exchange mechanism, because that can be compromised. I think most of the standards bodies out there, most of the U.S. agencies specifically that are interested in this topic are fairly comfortable with the fact that AES is probably going to be okay as long as larger key sizes continue to be used. Existing hash algorithms, as long as we're at the SHA-2 or SHA-3 level. I mean, SHA-1 was a problem a while ago. So most, if not all, organizations should have migrated off of SHA-1 already. And then the TLS, 1.2, 1.3 migration. I think most organizations feel fairly comfortable, especially with the actual scheme, as long as the supporting crypto that is dependent on RSA or ECC has been replaced by quantum safe algorithms. Just a point of note to give you kind of a feel for the overall effort that is probably going to be involved in this migration is that if you look at, when SHA-1 was introduced to the market in 1995, that's a hashing algorithm. By 2002, SHA-2 had been released. SHA-1 was determined to be vulnerable about 15 years ago. And even as recently as a year ago, we still had organizations coming to us to Entrust as a provider of PKI services and solutions, asking us to support SHA-1 for a variety of different use cases. So not that, there wasn't a real reason for it. We ultimately rejected the request, but it gives you a sense of, something that from a PKI perspective, we look at as maybe a fairly trivial migration in terms of a hash algorithm, took a very, very long time. I mean, SHA-2 has now been out for, close to 22, 23 years, and is still does not have 100% adoption in the marketplace. So we can't afford to make these kind of mistakes. We can't afford to have long tails on this type of migration when we're talking about quantum safe crypto, because the stakes are very, very high. To that end, I'm just putting this up as an information or an informational page, is that the U.S. National Security Agency is taking this very seriously. Obviously, they have heavily invested in crypto and also have high degree of a high need for confidentiality in the data sets that they process and hold. But this is the same type of talk track that we have heard from CISA, from NIST, and we frankly have also heard it from other international bodies. I've highlighted here one of the timelines that NIST is, or that the NSA is proposing right now, in which the new when they say CNSA 2.0 algorithms, that's essentially adoption of the three NIST standards that I showed in one of my first few slides. The FIPS 203, 204, 205 triad, supporting those by 2025, preferring them by 2025, and exclusive use by 2030. This represents a huge effort. It represents a huge effort not only for the standards community, but also for the vendor community. And I can tell you that just from Entrust perspective, we make, in addition to having a pretty broad PKI portfolio and identity portfolio, we also carry a line and manufacture a line of cryptographic hardware security modules. These are high-end devices. They are long life devices in the field. They typically have to be certified by NIST labs to a variety of different specifications, not the least of which is FIPS 140. And, as you may know, there was a migration over the past few years from and a deprecation of the FIPS 140-2 certification in favor of the FIPS 140-3 certification. And that's been going on now for 2 years, and there's still a substantial queue of products awaiting certification in the FIPS 140-3 lab queue. I think the takeaway from that is that this is going to be a significant effort in getting products certified by labs after the standards have been finally approved and after the standards bodies have done the work of incorporating the crypto into the different functional components and implementations that we depend on from day to day. So very, very aggressive timelines from the NSA's perspective. From our perspective, by the NSA, many of the U.S. government bodies that are kind of competent in this area are recommending the same types of timelines. So a great deal of urgency. Just to give you a context too, this is not just the U.S. saying this. This is a complement of a variety of different international standards bodies that are essentially saying the same thing. Most of them are very supportive of the NIST algorithm competition due to its transparency and its openness to submissions from crypto experts from around the world. So I think the U.S. has done a good job of building international collaboration and international buy-in on the program. And all of these organizations here have a official position on quantum safe crypto and fairly aligned to the U.S. Regulatory and standards bodies in terms of adoption and timelines. So let's talk about the post-quantum ecosystem. The problem, as I indicated earlier, is there are probably more than just this, but these are kind of the two highlights, and probably you've heard these discussed before. The first one is known as the harvest now, decrypt later threat. So we know that there is data that is digitally signed. It may be encrypted emails that have been encrypted with S-MIME, which is an asymmetric crypto implementation, digital signing of documents. And the problem is that we know that there are malicious actors today that are operating inside of organizational network boundaries. It's not if you've been hacked, it's when you were hacked and how long the malicious actor was inside your network before they were discovered and ejected. So we can assume that there's a great deal of data that's being exfiltrated out of organizations. We hear about them every day. And it's what happens to that data post exfiltration. So the expectation is that these malicious actors, especially if it's long life, high value data, will just sit on the data for as long as they have to until such time as scale quantum computers are available for them to access. Maybe they'll be available as a service through maybe even the hyperscalers that we use today. To be able to compromise that data, to decrypt it, to alter the signature on the data. And then, obviously we have a huge problem there. Think of a, digitally signed contract, a land contract, a corporate contract. And, right now we depend on, especially in Europe, digital signatures are a huge part of contractual life, of daily business life. If that what we depend on today for document integrity and document proof of origin, if that gets compromised, we have a huge problem. The other issue is long life connected devices. This really has to do with the PKI certificate, the identity certificate, and the signed firmware packages that are on said device. So again, what we're dealing with here is an asymmetric crypto vulnerability. Digital signatures utilize asymmetric crypto. And the ramifications here, I think, are quite large because, if you're dealing with a machine that is being put out in the field at a distant endpoint, is not readily accessible after deployment, using signed code, using signed firmware, if a malicious actor is able to access that device, compromise the signature on the software or the firmware, then you can no longer trust that device on your network. So obviously stakes are very, very high there, which is really one of the reasons why the NSA is pushing so hard for adoption and exclusive support of quantum safe algorithms, in those aggressive timelines. So this gives you kind of an idea of, what we kind of term as the galaxy of influence here. So NIST being at the center is responsible for, the establishment of the standards, the public comment periods, the whole process around bringing a new standard into the marketplace. After these standards are ratified, which I think, as I said earlier, we expect to be sometime later this summer, then it's the responsibility of the standards bodies, so the IETFs, the IEEEs, the ITU, et cetera, all these standards bodies that operate worldwide and have responsibility and competence for specific implementation standards actually have to do the work of creating implementations based on these new cryptographic primitives. A lot of this work is already done, not done. It's being done. It's being worked on. They're certainly not waiting for ultimate ratification of the standards. I think NIST has expected for some time that they were probably going to move forward with the 4 that they've selected. So work has already been done. Entrust itself is doing quite a bit of work, definitely on the IETF working groups. But this gives you kind of a feel for, the cascading effect that this is going to have. And I also alluded to this earlier, is that, I think the primary thing that to keep in mind is that product certifications for these new standards is going to have a very, very long tail. There has been a huge jump in, new certification applications once, the FIPS 140-3 standard was taken out of draft mode and approved and then brought into the mainstream. Some of the lab delays, I think, had to do a little bit with COVID, and that just really sort of slowed down the lab process. But given the queue that they're now dealing with as a result of that, they're already at a backlog. And, once these new standards are, officially ratified by the standards bodies, then, the test labs are the ones that actually have to build the test harnesses, the processes, and then open the queue for products. I expect that, there's probably going to be a substantial delay in getting products certified based on that. And so organizations are probably going to have to make some risk-based decisions on running products that, while they may be in a certification queue, are not yet certified. I think some customers are doing that today, quite frankly, with the FIPS 140-3 products. If you're in queue for one of those products or one of those certifications, your products are in queue for 140-3. It's assumed to be a lower risk. And so organizations are making that decision to go forward pending certification. This is just an informational slide to show you the scope of PQC work at the IETF. And as I mentioned earlier, Entrust is very, very involved in a lot of these IETF working groups. And we have representatives that are on a number of these different working groups. And it's really about, making sure that the new crypto primitives are properly adopted. This is really the biggest concern, I think, for cryptographers, is not in the mathematics of the crypto primitives that NIST is about to certify. I think those have been inspected and tested by enough different parties that I think, that most organizations that have looked at it feel fairly confident about the mathematics and the soundness of the algorithms themselves. The real uh, the real potential for problem is in the implementation, because it's such a scale issue. Um, with X.509, for instance, which regulates it's basically the standard for digital certificates, there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot more moving parts with the new algorithms. So there's a lot of opportunity to miss something. And as the good guys have to get something right. They have to be 100% of the time. The bad guy only has to be right once. So that's the real issue. And I think that's what's giving a lot of people pause. So a lot of work to be done there. A lot of very smart people, including people from Entrust, working on this. But it gives you a feel for the scope of work that just is at the IETF, and the IETF is not the only standards body out there that's got concerns and confidence over some of these implementations. So, what does a quantum journey to quantum safe look like? Okay, so this is kind of the advice that we've been giving to customers, I think, for probably about the past 2 years. It's absolutely in concert with what the NSA, with what the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency of DHS is saying, and what NIST is saying as well, is that there needs to be first and foremost, an internal organization inside of your enterprise that has competence on this topic. So a crypto clearinghouse, or a crypto center of excellence, if you will, that has competence, it has executive leadership, stakeholder buy-in, and that this organization becomes the clearinghouse for all things crypto in your enterprise. That needs to be taken seriously, and it's very difficult because of the scope of work involved, and how many things it's going to touch in your organization. It's going to be very difficult to move the ball forward without executive leadership, executive stakeholder involvement. And then, there's a full set of different types of readiness activities that need to kind of be taken on now. All right. So there's a crypto inventory, right? I alluded earlier to the fact that, systems in most organizations are regularly scanned for known security vulnerabilities, exploits, and, with the rise of zero-day exploits, I mean, the pace of this is very, very intense. Having said that, can't neglect the cryptographic artifacts that are resonant inside of the software stacks, the operating system stacks, the device firmware stacks spread across the ecosystem. In some cases, are really just not even being scanned, right? They're not being looked for. There are problems out there for sure. There are absolutely software vendors that are still using MD5 hashing. There are software vendors that are still using hard-coded SHA-1 hash certificates, 1024-bit certificates, deprecated versions of Bouncy Castle, everything, right? There's all kinds of different reasons for that. Vendor laziness. Sometimes there's, there's a good reason why a software package can't be updated because there's a backward compatibility issue. Sometimes it's, a home rolled software package that continues to serve the needs of the organization. Maybe the development team has moved on, or there's just not enough priority given to updating, that home rolled package. Whatever the reason, these all represent vulnerability points. There also needs to be a very, very hard look at information. What information is your organization holding? What is the high value data? What is the data that can get you in trouble with the compliance agencies, depending on what your compliance landscape looks like? These are things all need to be taken into account. But knowing is really what I think a lot of organizations struggle with, and you can't really embark on what we call a crypto agility strategy or a quantum safe strategy until you understand where your risks are. And really that's the first order of business. is to getting that done. And then, I'm not going to get too much into quantum key distribution. It's a little bit of a controversial topic, but in any case, the takeaway from this slide is that it's a moving target. It's something that needs to be taken seriously. And even though, the expectation is that quantum computers won't be available for another, 7 to 10 years, there's enough effort that has to be taken on right now to necessitate immediate term action. This is kind of a different way of covering this slide here, a different way of covering, what I just kind of discussed. But I think what it does is it kind of distills out into very common sense steps what needs to be done by just about any type of organization when it comes to this problem. What I sense a lot when I talk to customers in the field is that there's 3 different types. There's the first customer has not even, and this has happened to me as recently as this week, has not even heard of this issue, which is shocking. The second is I've heard about it. I have no idea what I'm going to do about it. I'm completely overwhelmed. There's a lot of noise in the marketplace. All the things that, we're used to dealing with. So the thing to keep in mind here is that, it's a very, very normal, common sense type of process. And this type of process can take you through to getting to that end state that you want to get to. I will say quickly that, this is probably, and I think most of the experts that have been surveyed, and I think this even goes to some of the analyst community, is the expectation is that this is not going to be the only time we have to do this. Technology being what it is, malicious actors being what they are, there's a distinct possibility that some of the new crypto, some of the new algorithms may not prove to be as reliable or as battle tested as AES or ECC have been over time. That's the main reason we trust sorry, I said AES, I meant RSA. We trust RSA, we trust ECC today because, frankly, they've stood the test of time. They've done well, they're battle hardened, we can trust them. We're just not going to know about these implementations and these new primitives until they've done some time in the field. So the expectation is that maybe that there is going to be some vulnerabilities discovered. Hopefully it's just in the implementations that can be corrected. But notion of crypto agility is important from that perspective. And what crypto agility means is the ability to abstract dependencies in your operating ecosystem from the crypto stack that it's used. So, and it sounds great on paper. And, frankly, from an implementation perspective, I think anybody that's done any time operationally in the field knows how difficult that will actually be to achieve. But it's a laudable goal. And I think what we'll do is thinking that way will protect organizations from future migrations. Massive migrations in crypto will make things a little bit easier. I think there's some truth to the fact that, organizations will build up some muscle memory once they've gone through this once or twice so that it'll become easier over time. This slide does a good job, I think, of maybe simplifying, what we're trying to accomplish here. Finding it, we talked through what it looks like to do inventories, to do information classifications, to understand where your risk is, setting up your organizational center of excellence, putting tooling in place, having communications with your software supply chain, your vendor supply chain, having your InfoSec team properly educated on this topic, looking for problems. That is what the control part is about. And then automating it, right? That's what we hope to get to, where orchestration updates of quantum safe crypto becomes an easier effort going forward. Maybe we don't ever get to the fully automated stage, but at some point, it becomes a little bit easier so that, when we have to migrate to a different crypto stack, or we have to migrate to a new algorithm or a new implementation, it's not as difficult as it was before. So to kind of button up here, the takeaway is that, PKI and crypto are absolutely critical infrastructure in your organization. They're part of your trust fabric. They're probably foundational to your trust fabric. It's a false assumption to assume that once you have a PKI and a strong crypto policy in place, that things are forever secured. And, hopefully this presentation has exposed that assumption a little bit. Risks are absolutely unknown in the average enterprise today. I don't care if it's government. I don't care if it's financial. I don't care if it's enterprise, commercial organization, right? Risks are just not well known enough because organizations are still in the very baby steps of establishing this kind of process organizationally. So getting their cryptographic center of excellence in place, and then, walking through the steps. Crypto resources are scarce and expensive. I can tell you that I work for a company that specializes in this type of thing, and the talent is hard to find. We've got a lot of talent here. It's not always easy to hold on to, but you've got to find yourself a trusted partner to walk you through what this looks like. And you certainly want to make sure that you are partnering with vendors that are committed to this as part of their roadmap. I'm just going to say it now, and I think I alluded to it in the previous slide, but that procurement organizations absolutely need to be asking these questions when procurements are being made, when renewals are being done, when you're having a quarterly business review with a key supplier. Start talking about this. What is that supplier doing in terms of PQ roadmap for their product portfolio? If they have crypto dependencies, they absolutely should have a good answer for that at this point. If they don't have a good answer for that, or if they're not taking this seriously, you should be concerned about that and maybe looking elsewhere. One of the reasons that this is so hard is because best practices are inconvenient, and policies, platforms, and procedures are not always robust or maintained. So it's already a challenging problem, but because of the human factor and the fact that people just get busy and lose the thread on something and just have multiple priorities that we're all dealing with, things fall through the cracks. And this is enough of a serious issue that it needs to really be taken seriously. Everything's sort of reassessed from a crypto perspective to make sure that you're not going to be you find out too late that you've got a serious vulnerability in a mission critical application or a customer facing web service that needs to be mitigated and on a very short time frame. So the watchword here is get in front of it. And start the work now. I want to talk just for a minute. This is a little bit technical. I'm sure for me it's technical. Maybe for some of you on the summit it's not. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that Entrust is doing right now. So, as I mentioned earlier, once the standard or the PQ algorithms themselves are standardized by NIST, the IETF and other standards bodies have got to do the work on the implementation. And this is an example of something that Entrust is working on right now. And this is what we call a hybrid bridge certificate template that has a variety of different, has a couple of different benefits depending on what you choose. So there's a kind of two things that you have to think about when you're looking at updating a crypto stack for a technology like PKI that is heavily embedded in all ecosystems. And so PKI is one of those things that, people have heard of, probably don't really understand how comprehensive it is to a modern ecosystem. But it's foundational. Very, very difficult to have a modern device identity platform, any kind of web service front end without securing that with digital certificates that are issued from a PKI. So it's embedded. It's how we drive a lot of our activities, our infrastructure, our commerce today. So there's a couple of possible issues here. First and foremost is there's a backward compatibility question. The truth is there may be devices, there may be software packages, there may be, just about anything that you can think of that depends on PKI today, but may not be updatable, may not be able to process the new quantum safe crypto. So to that end, what we've done is we've proposed something called a hybrid chameleon certificate type. And what this does is this continues to sign the public key with classical crypto, so RSA in this case, and it hides puts the quantum safe crypto into what we call version 3 extensions inside of the certificate. So what this enables is, when implemented, is for endpoints that don't know how to process a quantum algorithm. Well, let me just say it differently. It allows endpoints that know how to process quantum crypto to take advantage of the quantum crypto buried in the V3 extensions of the certificate. If the endpoint is not updatable, it can still use the RSA component of that certificate. And what we're looking at this as a way of easing the transition over the next 7 to 10 years, so that organizations can start putting quantum supported endpoints, devices, software modules into their ecosystem without worrying about breaking the things that can't be updated until such time as they can be updated. The other certificate type here is something we call composite. And composite uses a dual signature model. And the thought process with the dual signature model is not one of backward compatibility. It is one of protection and hedging our bets a little bit against, over the next 7 to 10 years, against a vulnerability discovery in either an implementation or in the actual crypto primitives. So what we do in this case is we sign, we have a dual composite signature. So we're signing with both RSA and quantum safe crypto, in this case, dilithium. And we're using a composite signature algorithm as well, so that in case there's a problem that's discovered with, one of the new libraries or one of the new primitives, we still have a secure fallback position with a known good algorithm like RSA or ECC. Again, only in the intervening 7 to 10 years. After, we get to this 10-year horizon, or whenever it happens, 2031, 2032, when it happens, we're all going to have to go full PQ support to ensure that, the information is protected. But this gives us a little bit of a hedging of the bets on one hand, and a little bit of a backward compatibility play on the other hand. There's a lot more to it. There's all kinds of, frankly, I think it's publicly available on the IETF bug track, GitHub. And so what we can do there is, certainly welcome to go. It's publicly available to read through that and kind of some of the conversations that are happening there, but there's a lot of active work happening there. just as a point of interest, the composite draft, you see this name Owensworth that's highlighted here. Mike Owensworth works for Entrust. He's one of our cryptographic engineers and one of our AppSec testers. So that was a lot. I'll probably as far as I'll go on that topic for right now. This gets back into sort of the process. This is a process that Entrust has designed. It's fairly aligned with sort of the same type of if you've reviewed the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model, the latest iteration, which I think was released maybe last April of 23, it sort of operates in that same way of thinking, right? Is that, there are, in this case, there are different levels that you can achieve as you kind of walk through the process. So, my experience tells me that many of these organizations are somewhere between the unknown and awareness level right now, unless there's a few big banks that we do a lot of work with that are in the management phase. They're proactive. They understand the threat. They understand the problem. They're well acquainted with the work that's being done on the different working groups. Obviously, there's nobody that's in an excellence mode right now. We just are just not there yet. But ultimately, this is what kind of a successful journey looks like. So that ultimately in 10 to 15 years, most organizations have gone through enough of this where they understand that it's not a state you actually reach. It's a constant cycle. But that there's constantly work that has to be done, but ultimately getting to that point, being aware, having a decent crypto agility strategy in place, having gone through this a few times, organizations will be better positioned to move forward in case they have to go through this type of thing again. Last slide. I'll just bring this back to the zero trust paradigm. So the diagram on the left there, I'm sure you're familiar with if you've reviewed the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model version 2 publication. It should be fairly obvious that unless you have a strong post-quantum cryptography strategy, so a strong crypto agility strategy, your zero trust strategy is going to be falling short. This is going to be a problem that is definitely going to be surfacing within the next 10 years, maybe even earlier, as I said. And if you're not completely protected from, to the extent you possibly can be, from what's going to be an obvious attack on legacy crypto with quantum safe computers, then you can't say that you've got a comprehensive and solid zero trust strategy. I mean, that should be fairly obvious to anyone here, but it's more than PKI. Asymmetric crypto is going to underpin your device pillar, your identity pillar, absolutely, your data pillar. You can't have a comprehensive, fleshed out zero trust strategy. Can't be climbing the ladder unless you're dealing with this specific problem. There's a number of ways to go about it. Hopefully you've learned something today. But I would say these are the things that you need to be looking at inside of your organization. In addition to doing host level, network level scans of all of your endpoints, anything that is involved in passing traffic, storing data, essentially anything that is networked needs to be looked at, because that can be potential vulnerability for your strategy and obviously for your data. So with that, that is all I had prepared. Julio, I don't know if there's any questions, but happy to take any if there are any.
No, thank you very much. Yes, we have a couple questions. The first one actually is mine. You mentioned that there are multiple efforts, right? Different agencies around the world. You also mentioned the industry, especially Entrust, is working to try to find a solution, right, for this problem. From the point of view of interop, right? Let's say there are like five solutions, different countries, different bodies. Do you see an issue in the future, especially for you guys, the people are building the solutions in order to support all these different flavors and versions of the PQ safe algorithms?
I think we're hopeful that I think that's one of the reasons we're so active on the standards bodies. It behooves us to do that, and it behooves us to steer our existing customers toward those standards bodies, and to help build collaboration and buy-in from a lot of our international customers, because frankly, some of our international customers are some of those standards bodies. So we do a lot of work there. Interop is obviously critically important. Somehow we've gotten to good interop with today. What we implement with classical crypto. So the hope is that everyone kind of gets on board. Um, and follows suit with what we're trying to do here. We know that it's been a U.S. led effort, but I think the U.S. has tried to do a good job of bringing in other countries' standards bodies, um, governments, military establishments, to get buy-in on these things, because you're absolutely right. Without interop, it's a losing proposition. I will say that I think China and Russia are doing their own things. They're not, part of what we're trying to do here. I know they do have efforts ongoing, but we don't do much work in those places. So a little less concern for us from commercial perspective. But
Okay, I have another question. In your opinion, how real are the harvest now decryptlator attacks?
so it's a good question. I don't know that. So it would depend. I think if you're using AES encrypt, so if you're using triple DES or you're using double DES, I don't know what to tell you. Those have been proven to be vulnerable. I think to even side channel attacks with classical computers. If you're using AES 256, I think the prevailing wisdom is that for right now, you should be reasonably secure. Um, I think that can change. And my advice to customers would be for pure symmetric encryption to use as big a key size as practical. So now the other part of this conversation, and that's symmetric. So on the other part of this conversation, in terms of asymmetric crypto, the problem, as I mentioned at the beginning, is really the key establishment methodology that happens in a TLS, or it happens in a when something is digitally signed, when a hash is signed. That mechanism is vulnerable if it's secured by RSA or ECC. So the primary issues I see there are devices that are in the field with signed firmware, with signed software payloads, where that signature can be compromised. I think that's a real threat. We've seen with I think a few high profile attacks. I think obviously with the SolarWinds uh, situation, that you have to have control of your signing keys, right? And so the prevailing wisdom today says code signing. When you're signing code, you're signing firmware, you need to have that keying material secured in a cryptographic module like an HSM. Well, if the crypto in that signature can be defeated, and you can duplicate or somehow edit that signature to make it look legit for software packages or for firmware packages, I think all bets are off, because then you can't trust any device that's on the network. You can't trust your software load. You can't because digital signature is what gives you that integrity check, and if that can be defeated, then all bets are off. That's the one I worry about.
Got it. And one last question here. It will be, is it necessary to replace the hardware that we're using today? For example, HSMs, crypto chips, and devices are using microcontrollers and low power devices.
Um, I would say that that would depend on your supplier. So I know that, for instance, Entrust has recently migrated to an FPGA architecture for increased performance, but also to accommodate in-field firmware upgrades that can support new crypto algorithms. So it's our expectation that our customers that are buying our appliances, and frankly, this has been something that was bought maybe 5 years ago. That's not going to be the case. Something that was bought recently, or this in the procurement pipeline, we support that. I think a lot of the and this is really comes back to implementation, right? Is that we're going to be dealing with bigger key sizes. We're going to be dealing with higher overhead on cryptographic computations. So there are probably some devices, low power devices, limited crypto capability devices that may have to be replaced, or there's going to have to be other mitigations that are put in place to protect those devices.
Okay. Well, Andrew, thank you very much. This has been very enlightening and also a little bit scary about the future. So,
Yeah, right on. Well, don't get scared. Just get serious and get working on it, because
yeah,
everybody's
yeah,
facing the same thing. This is not a one person problem. This is everybody's facing this.
right.
And your software vendors, your software supply chain, your ecosystem partners are definitely part of your solution here. So make sure that you're engaging with them early and often.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you, Julio.
Thank you very
Take care.
much. Bye.
Bye bye.